Greetings, one and all. Welcome to the 13th edition of the Best Practice Meet. Today's session is on contactless payment ecosystem. It is about no-touch experience tech, device innovations, policy interventions in national architecture. To give a little overview of the session, to set the context rather, let me just put this forward. The contactless payment have been emerging as a credible and innovative payment options for quite some time now. With the onset of COVID-19, digitalization has been pushed to the top gear. India is witnessing a rapid adoption of cashless payments fueled by active government push, architectural interventions like UPI, institutional arrangements for effective execution, and finally the vibrant fintech industry, which is also giving it a big push. This session will touch upon facets such as growth of no-touch and low-touch constructs, device innovations, policy interventions, and national architecture. Without further ado, I would now like to call upon stage the moderator for the session, Ms. Shweta Jain.
Thank you for the introduction.
Welcome, Ms. Shweta. Ms. Shweta is a payments and fintech specialist. Further, I'd like to now onboard the panel. Can I have Ms. Shweta Srivastava first? Hi,
Thank you so
welcome.
much.
Hi. Ms. Shweta Srivastava is the CTO for Paul Merchants Group Companies. And Mr. Harshit.
Thank you,
Hi,
Anand.
welcome, Mr. Harshit. Mr. Harshit Mingle is a CISO for Future Groups. And Ms. Shushmita next.
Thank you, Anand.
Welcome. Hi, Ms. Shushmita. Ms. Shushmita is the Associate Professor for IDRBT. Welcome.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for having me on board.
Yeah. Finally, can I have Mr. Sujon on the panel? Hi, Mr. Sujay. The Sujay Vasudevan is the Director for Cybersecurity at MasterCard. Ms. Shweta, may I request you to share your opening remarks and initiate the panel discussion. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Anand. Welcome everyone to the panel and to the interesting discussion on contactless payments. We've seen the journey so far as payment specialists, right? Right from cash-based payments to cashless, digitization journey to contactless now. I think I would want to kind of start with a very interesting question of, the pandemic has led to a lot of requirements from a tech and infra perspective, right? It didn't give us so much time to kind of adjust to the new environment where we had so much of buffer, like a year or two, to quickly grapple with the situation. So, would want to first pose the question to Shweta Srivastav, what does it mean and how difficult it was to kind of, develop in the new environment, adjust to the new tech infra requirements. What has been your journey and what do you think is the way forward?
Sure. Thank you so much for the question, Shweta. And I would start with thanking DACI for having me on board with the esteemed panelists. So coming back to your question, Shweta, I think pandemic has got too much hype in these 1.5 years. I think we should look beyond it now. And we all know that the effort towards contactless payments has always been there. I mean, since past couple of years, there has been a lot of propaganda around contactless payment. Whereas due to pandemic, it all got accelerated, and contactless payment became quite in demand, like as a product, because we were looking at no touch service delivery and social distancing, and digital payments, of course, got a much push from the government as well. It all basically works on technology infrastructure at the core, and technology that supports is of course RFID and NFC. So the different devices and different cards, debit cards, credit cards, mobile devices, wearables, stickers, all of that has got advanced, and they've got this NFC and RFID technology built in. So, with which gives a lot of convenience to the end user with respect to quick transactions, short queues at the checkouts, no pin exposure. But at the same time, there's a lot of threat and risk as well, considering that there is no authorization that happens for contactless payment, whereas there is a capping of 5,000, but then still there is a threat of the card getting lost, or if it is stolen, then there is an issue where RBI has put a lot of controls, checks and balances on payment providers, service providers like us. So when we look at it from the other side of the business, we have to take care of a lot of compliances, a lot of securities, infrastructure security, cyber security that comes into picture. We have to be compliant with a lot of certifications like PCI DSS, and DLP has to be there. The recurring audits are supposed to be there. What kind of firewalls we have? What kind of encryption are we ensuring? Anti-malware, anti-ransomware, all of that has to be in place from the technology side of it. Apart from that, if I talk about, as a responsible organization offering payment solutions, we are supposed to also keep educating our customers as well as in-house our own staff on how do we have to ensure the security and safety of our financial assets, considering the contactless payments being in picture. So there's a lot of need for customer education as well at the same time. So that's the whole gamut of things that has come across with the payment within the payment industry, and the way it is so dynamic. Everything there is every day there is a new technology innovation that is happening in this foray. It's really difficult to pace up, but it's really challenging and exciting when you really want to adopt it and extend it to your customers.
That's a fair answer, Shweta. So what you're saying is basically scaling up was not, as difficult, but basically, bringing up risk management processes in place and making sure that frauds and risk is minimized in the system overall, and creating awareness, were the few challenges that you probably were facing when, you were pushing through contactless payments, right? Harshad, would you want to share any further views from your perspective?
Sure, Shweta. Thank you, DSCI, for bringing me, hosting me here. It's a very interesting topic because cloud has, I mean, the COVID-19 has already accelerated a lot of changes in data centers, in data, and in terms of contactless payments, contactless onboarding, those are also increasing simultaneously. Nearly 48 countries have already started their journey, and they have reached to more than 50% of the usage. Even RBI, as Shweta rightly mentioned, earlier cap was 2,000. Now it has extended to 5,000. So we can definitely see that this move is well supported by the regulators as well. Now, from my standpoint, what I have seen is basically, security is always an enabler to the business, and we always, are part of the agile, or modern technologies which are, companies are trying to implement. Just if you look at the DNA of payment industry, it has changed rapidly. Recently, I was going through some of the research. It says that the even the fast-track transactions have increased somewhere close to 11.64 crores. Some numbers. This is in May. So that means the adoption is very fast. Now, where is security here? So we always say that the culture eats strategy for breakfast. What I mean to say here is basically the adoption culture is the most important thing when you are actually defining any strategy. So in my opinion, bringing security or privacy well in advanced stage, well in the design phase, that is going to help organization to have a very robust risk management framework. Now, there are two ways to look at this. One is basically contactless payment, and second is contactless card. Now, there are many threats to the contactless card, and I think all of us are aware. So there are, of course, there are ways to look at the threat as well. There are wallets which we can actually RFID blocking based, wallet we can go for to ensure that the customers are well aware they have to protect their cards. Second piece is basically if you look at the NFC based authentication or NFC based transaction. Today, I think more important is basically host card emulation based technologies. They are quite popularly implemented in the mobile technologies. I think moreover the security in terms of the NFC based payment is very much is there, but I think the awareness is very much required, because today vulnerabilities in mobile or in endpoint technologies can lead to the challenges in adapting these kind of technologies. Last point which I want to make sure that the things are changing so fast that there is one Swedish based company which has already started evaluating fingerprint based or biometric based implementation of contactless payment. These are some of the things which are happening, and security is always front runner in this. Actually, we are enabling business to ensure that we are there sharing the best practices, what they need to do while implementing these kind of technologies. We always think that security is core and is with business in all these times. This is what I would like to share, Shweta. We are there and we are going forward in a very supportive manner.
Well said, Harshad. So what you're saying is privacy by design, regulatory by design, and technology by design, right? So these are the three principles which the industry is kind of working with, but making sure reducing the cybersecurity and the fraud related risk, right? That's at the core. Harshad, from your perspective, since brick and mortar is what it means for you largely, right? What is the kind of penetration problems and challenges that you are facing in terms of adoption? Because you said that adoption is increasing very rapidly. What has been your experience on the brick and mortar side?
See, if you look at the new technologies today, every customer, see, we are more focused on customer oriented architecture. Which, what I mean to say is basically, customer should be happy. They need to retain their trust. Now during COVID time, we have seen customers are not really hesitant to put up the pins. They are ready to use their mobile apps. So we are well prepared. I mean, before COVID, we our entire future pay app was ready to handle contactless payments. So these are some of the things which we implemented well in advance. And I think going forward, this is going to be the new normal. I mean, every customer, we are thinking more from a customer standpoint. Though transactions are increasing, whether our systems are prepared to handle those contactless payments is something which we have evaluated earlier. The performance based systems, the security around it, the most important trust is basically, are we ensuring that the customer data is safe, secured. These are some of the customer challenges which we understood well in advance. Whether your systems are patched enough, do you have any kind of vulnerabilities which can lead to the customer data leakage. These are some of the challenges which we have seen, and we have already addressed these issue well in advance. Having a just having a PCI DSS is not going to give customer a confidence, but the implementing, walking them with a customer that this is what actually we have implemented gives more confidence to the customer, and this is what we have seen in past. And this is going to be a culture or DNA of ongoing payment transactions. This is what my thoughts are.
Looks absolutely apt. So my next question will be to Sushmita. Ma'am, you have seen, and we have all witnessed the regulatory support. From a policy perspective, they are at the forefront when it comes to any innovation. You call it digitization, you call it contactless, or you call it blockchain and anything else, right? So a regulator has worked hand in hand, shoulder to shoulder with the industry when it comes to innovation overall. From your experience perspective, and from your insight perspective especially, what are the new things that the industry can expect in the times to come, and where are we headed on the policy side? If you could kind of throw some light here.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me on board once again. So, I could just start with the first point. Like recently, RBI has released one master direction on digital payment. So this came in February 2021, and we were all looking forward to like what are the recommendations that they have provided for everybody who are in the business, like from the BFSI sector, who are all the bankers, what they have to amend from their end. They have clearly mentioned about all the sections, how the security from the internet point of view, like if you're making a transaction from an internet, how it should be, what could be the measures that you have to maintain initially, On-premise data security, when you're talking about that the data is on-premise, because that was another regulation that was discussed by RBI, that now on regulators have to keep the data on-premise in the cloud environment, even though they have the third-party proprietary added with them, but still they have to somehow manage it on-premise. With respect to how devices and other things that we are seeing today, uh, yeah, we are moving to a generation where we are being more tech aware with IoTs, with respect to wearable technologies, with respect to icons nearby the terminals when people go and make a transaction at any point of sale, right? So the day by day the new technologies are added on, the challenges are increasing to a far extent. This is one of the challenges that we see in the economy that we have to address, as well as there are one more thing that is going on. It's like how with the revolution that we are seeing, like one of the aspect that we are currently moving on with the blockchain technology to be added on. So what could be the measures, or what could be the possibilities, like how blockchain technology could really add upon it? So there are certain organizations working in London, like the fintech companies. Also in India, we have company named Tontag. They have started their, kind of an experiment, I could say. Like they have started their innovation with respect to like how contactless payment could be add on if blockchain could be added into it. We do understand blockchain has a wider aspect of being seen, like if it is in case of cross border finance transaction, if it is with respect to the trade finance, also if it's like basically with respect to supply chain thing, if you know. But apart from that, like if you're seeing in our day-to-day life, if you're using a contactless ecosystem, and we want to add upon with that as a blockchain framework which can enable us to have a secure trust environment, as well as it says that whatever goes inside the data, like in a blockchain which says like it is kind of a ledger, will not be mutable again, like it will be immutable, it won't be destroyed, cannot be tampered. So you will have safety of the data that you stores over there. And yeah, it will be distributed to some extent. It means majority of the stakeholders who are being the partakers into the blockchain ecosystem will hold the data with them. So data tampering will be reduced to a larger extent. Transaction cost could be a little bit different compared to what we see in different platforms now. But yes, there are other issues that are right now there with respect to security, privacy, with respect to authentication, with respect to tampering and other things, could be mitigated at the initial levels. So yeah, blockchain could be one of the add-on features today that we can see. Other thing, if you're talking about 5G enablement, so we are trying. Actually, I could add it over here is like we are a nation where we have more than banked population to the unbanked population, where the people who are not even into the payment channel yet. So during this I think pandemic, it would have been really hit them very bad when they see that majority of the transaction has to be in an online mode, and they were not aware of the technology that they see. They were not coped up with the situation that they have to deal with. Many of them I could relate it to, like people when I used to take some training sessions for bankers from northeastern zones, from different zones in India. They used to just relate to the situation when customers just come down and say that I am not able to make a transaction because I cannot go to a bank or ATM because they're partially working. And the feeling that they had, that if they touch the cash, now the virus would even increase, and the pandemic would really create a scenario in the house. So there were many situations that we dealt during this pandemic. So we were running training sessions for many of these bankers, many of the communities, to teach them and make them aware, like how can they communicate with their customers in different end zones. Yeah, so that's how we started. So 5G, how it could really enable. Now if you talk about having edge level of cloud present in nearby an ATM server, or maybe some other places, which is closing in some closed community, that could really enable these people to at least make a transaction from their home. At least basic awareness has to be given to them with respect to, if you could give them a demo kind of thing, online video channels and series to teach them in different multilingual languages, which is very important because they don't understand the basic format of like the English as a basic standard. Maybe Hindi could be one of the mode they can go on with, or maybe some other local languages that we see. So yeah, the front end could be like having a in a vicinity one edge computing network which could simply allow these entities these customers to really communicate with them instead of just going over to the bank branch or maybe to ATM center to just withdraw some cash. So yeah, from technology perspective, I could say that we do have a lot of scope, and we are really growing with many fintechs and many organizations clubbing hands together and just seeing like what move we can bring to the society and how can the changes could be varied with time that we see. Yes, Shweta.
Thanks so much, Sushmita. I think very, very relevant because, because of these regulatory changes and, the support from payment ecosystem, the way everybody actually tried capturing, digitized payments or contactless payments, I think the last mile consumer was, impacted, but to a minimum. We all tried our level best to make sure that there is a minimum impact on the last mile consumer. So, thanks to the regulator for coming in the forefront and supporting the industry, I think. Very valid. I think 5G along with a combination of blockchain will be a blockbuster in times to come, right? Contactless payments anyways is growing. So, we have a lot more, I think, in the action in times to come. Yeah. So my next question, I would say, would be to Sujoy. Sujoy, from your experience perspective, and it has to be, very, very vast. From a cyber security perspective, from an infrastructure perspective, we are seeing a phenomenal growth, when it comes to digitization, when it comes to contactless payments, and, MasterCard is at the forefront of it. So, what is it that you guys are doing, to make sure that that fraud risk is minimum, the payments are secured, there is enough cyber security in place, and, what is the way forward from your perspective? How are you seeing it?
Yeah, thanks, Shweta, and thanks, DSCI, for having me here. I think interesting question. I think so. Mastercard, we've always prided ourselves on being a very secure way of making payments, on innovating in the technology space, innovating in the security space, and bringing good and latest technologies to our consumers. Right. We strongly believe that you put the consumer right in the middle, and what a consumer looks at is convenience, saying if it's convenient for me to use this form of payment, I'm going to use it. And if I have 2 or 3 options, I'd probably choose the most convenient one. On the other hand, we need to build in security into that, because if you have convenience without security, you're asking for trouble, right? So what's really happened is, it's been an evolving process. It's nothing that we landed today with the contactless payment or contactless card. It was evolved. So cards used to be just a embossed card, which used to be slugged, moved to the mag stripe, moved to chip, and moved to contactless. So if you look at your contactless card today, you have a chip on it, you have an RFID on it, you still have a mag stripe on it, and then the mag stripe is probably the weakest link as far as that physical plastic is concerned. And coincidentally, just a couple of days back, we announced our roadmap to removing the mag stripe from cards. So we removed that level of risk completely from that plastic as well, right? Yes, there have been a lot of speculation on how safe that plastic is. The data on the mag stripe, I mean, it's historic. I mean, that's as safe as it ever was. Nothing's really changed on that. But the RFID contactless, there have been a lot of implementations that have happened, or technology changes which have happened over the last few years to make it better. Number one is it needs to be in full contact. It's not a lot of media or there's news saying that you just have to go close to it and it's contactless to that extent. It's not really contactless. It has to be a tap, and it's not near field. Second is there are checks which again, thanks to the great work by RBI, there are alerts which go out to customers. There are risk mitigation programs, as Shweta talked about, which are there for the issuers to look at it. And interestingly, if you have more than one contactless card in your pocket, which is the case with a lot of people today. Even if you try tapping it, it will not work because there are two signals which are coming in. So I think those kind of things, those security in that contactless space is really is developing. Overall adoption, thanks to more people having contactless cards, the pandemic which kind of brought in the more awareness, RBI raising that limit to 5,000 has really increased adoption in this. It's made it more convenient for customers to now go and say, I'll tap rather than pulling out cash. That's also helped, right? So a lot of things, good things happening in there. And I said, maximum has to go, and there's a plan for that. Coming to the other part of it, which is the digital part, how we're looking at it, right? And digital also has grown. App-based payments have grown. We have seen massive adoption of that. And one of the issues is, I mean, they're very secure, right? But unlike the physical factor, which if I have a card in my pocket, and then someone has to get physical access to that card, or someone has to swipe it or anything like that, someone can be inside my phone and I wouldn't even know about it, right? Someone can have access to that data, and I wouldn't know about it. And I think that's the biggest risk that digital, we face with digital. The other big risk is the individual now starts becoming the weakest link. So you put in a lot of security, you put in an OTP, you put in a password. Social engineering, the crooks have got extremely smart. They use all sorts of methods. And believe me, they are investing in technology as much as we are, right? We say we're using AI, they're probably using AI as well to identify who's most vulnerable, who do I call with what information, right? So that's happening. And that's one part of it. The other, and this is something which is worrying, is as the payment industry, and we talked about it, and the panelists talked about it. We have multiple data security standards. You have, say, PCI DSS. As a bank, you're supposed to do ISO. This is a lot of it, right? But there is a lot of industries who are actually collecting personal information of people who are not under this purview, right? And some of that personal information is getting hacked today, right? So two aspects again. One is that information now gets in the hands of the fraudsters, which then they use to make sure their social engineering attacks are better. So if I call you, Shweta, and I have your details of your bank, your mobile number, and say that you did this transaction because I got all this information from, let's say, a merchant which got hacked, right? You're really going to start trusting me, and then you're going to share more information, in which case I can defraud you, and that's happening, right? The second thing that's happening is ransomware attacks, which is there's been a massive democratization of cybercrime. Earlier, it used to be just large syndicates, or probably best of the best world hackers, and they really did not have the time to go to small industries or SMEs or companies down the street. They were targeting just the big fish. But now what's happened is a lot of these toolkits for cybercrime are also available on the dark web, and cybercrime has really come down the road from you. So pretty much a lot of this is now started impacting smaller companies, a lot of ransomware attacks, which is a big worry, right? And we all know, people in the industry know that less than 1% of cybercrime is actually reported. And what is reported itself is an alarming number, right? So one of the things which MasterCard, and since you asked what MasterCard is doing, is we have actually acquired some technology which helps identify what cyber threats a company can have, purely from an outside-in scan. Because what we see is it's like Harshad will tell you. I mean, there's a lot of effort at a future group, or at Paul merchants, to really start making sure that you're secure, your boundaries are secure. But you have a long supply chain. You have 50, 100 vendors out there who may have access to your systems, definitely have access to your data, and they do have information, they're probably not secure. And your suddenly what you realize is your attack surface, which you are looking at today, sitting at my company, this is my company, the attack surface today is actually much larger. So we have brought in technologies which help identify, not only yourself, but where a particular company can monitor all the other vendors and supply chain as well. So that's something we're doing in the cyberspace, apart from all the other innovation, using AI to really stop fraud, which is more of our, in the payment space as well. I could talk for a lot longer, but I'll hand it back to you because I'm sure there are a lot more questions that need to be asked.
So I think one question that comes up from the discussion, Sujoy, is basically basic standards which are mandated from the regulator. Call it banks, call it card issuers, call it payment companies. Everyone is adhering to those basic minimum standards, right? And then there are best practices. So probably everyone in the ecosystem is also complying with those best practices norms, making sure that cybersecurity risk is minimum, right? From an incremental perspective, it's very heartwarming to see that you are acquiring companies which are at the forefront to control any kind of cybersecurity risk that may arise because of use of either a digitized payment mode or a contactless payment mode. So very very well put, I think. And the crooks are smarter, like you said, right? I mean, if we are investing in technology, they are equally investing in technology, and maybe they are
Absolutely.
ahead of the curve, right? So yeah, and
It's cat and mouse for sure.
it's cat and mouse. And I think very interesting point is everybody in the ecosystem, you call it a merchant, you call it a payment company, you call it bank, everybody is investing in the systems and security standards, right? Still these crooks are somewhere able to manage to kind of defraud a customer, right? So that's the beauty behind it. So yeah, we all have to up our game and increase our standards accordingly. Very well put.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think coming back to Sushmita, one very interesting thing that I was just thinking and kind of wanted to be discussed on the table. These regulatory sandbox, ma'am. I mean, innovation at the forefront and encouraging industry players to kind of come in and innovate and experiment, I think is a very welcome step. Similarly, 5G that you talked about, or blockchain that you kind of talked about. The efforts from a regulatory perspective are very, very welcome for the entire ecosystem. What is it that we can together as an industry do for increasing penetration, for contactless payments? From your perspective, what do you think? Maybe awareness is one of the things, right? I mean, people aren't aware. There is an unbanked population that we have to kind of cater to. What are the other thoughts that you would have from your perspective?
Yeah, so here I could add one interesting thing. First of all, we can segregate our community, what we see. We can call the people who are not that tech savvy, or the people who are not in the generation like how the Gen X and Gen Y are right now. We can call them as the digital aliens. And the people who are right now very much prompt with the technology and the different like whatever we see, they would be the digital natives. Now what we have to do is, first of all, we have to understand the two groups and their requirements. So if you talk about the people who are not that tech savvy or not into this digital realm, we have to understand the present requirement. So if you look at some elderly person who are basically maybe withdrawing their pension and so on, right now government has anyways put on so many platforms where they can just verify their authenticity, that they are alive and so on, and can get their pension somehow, and they would get the online inputs. But yet many of these elders are not yet ready to go on and move on with this newer flow. What they really scare about is, I do not understand the platform, I do not understand the environment right now. Whatever you throw it to me, you tell me to just put my credentials and so things will happen in the back end. But I have this hard-earned money with me, and I do not know how it will process through. So the major question comes from their end is like, why do they have to go on with the digital realm? What is the requirement for them? Won't it be easy for them to go as they used to do in the normal norm, like going to a traditional banking ecosystem, talking with some front end staff, and then having a friendly chat and then come back? So this is the problem from their end, like what they right now see. If you look at the newer generation, uh, their point of view is completely different. They just want everything with their, at their reach, like a fingertip. So just want very fast, very accurate, apt to the requirement. So the customization need to be very different than what we are seeing for the elderly people. So they want it to be personalized to some extent. They want us as a regulator to understand, even the banking sector to understand their requirement, their needs, how they could save, how they would go on and move on. So we have to first understand these two different personas, you could call them, or the two different groups and communities, and then we can see like in what way we can bring solutions that could help both of them to be enabled in a digital platform.
Absolutely well said, ma'am. Because what we are witnessing is, for example, ATMs are not within their reach, right? So even if they are banked population and they have a bank account which they can use, either ATM cash is not available, or ATM is not within their reach, right? So making a digital transaction for them sometimes becomes a challenge. And that's where probably digital transactions and contactless payments will really kind of solve their last mile problem.
Yes.
So well put. My next question will be to Shweta. From an ecosystem perspective, Shweta, from your merchant's perspective, how are you seeing the change, and what is the feeling that you are getting sitting at the center from your counterparties,
So
etc.?
I'll just give you Yeah, so I'll just give you a brief about the company, the group company Paul Merchants. We have been into financial, offerings since past 20-25 years now. And primarily the way we used to operate was through brick and mortar structures. So we had branches across the country, and the offerings were around financial services again. So this was foreign exchange, this was money transfer, and gold loan lending was only through gold loan. Now, looking at the current trends in the market where everybody is going digital and the customer is also aware and doesn't want to, because they are getting aware of the services that are available on a click of a button. They would never want to visit you, and especially in the current scenario of COVID around, they would want to sit back at home and still avail the services. So company like Paul Merchants had to think of reaching out to the customers without, actually asking them to visit us. Rather, we created platforms for reaching them out. So we invested a lot on digital platforms. Plus, we have recently launched our own cards, prepaid cards. So we have a PPI license as well, and we've launched our PPI cards. And while Sujay was mentioning that yes, the card itself has undergone into so much of technology improvement, there is something called a virtual card also, which has been introduced. So we've also launched our own virtual cards by the name Paul Pay, where a customer can sitting back at home instantly get a card issued and start using it without having to visit anyone or wait for the card to come to them and then start transacting. So this is also not really a contactless. I would not call it a contactless card, but that's a convenience that we are extending to them, which is completely in their safe environment. They don't need to go to any merchant or go to any bank for the card issuance or somebody visiting them for issuing the card. So even the customer KYC is happening over video KYC. Technology has really enabled companies like Paul Merchants to go from a conventional mode of operating to a new age way of extending services to the customer.
Thanks, Shweta. Very relevant. My next question is actually relevant both for Harshad and for Sujoy. So, Harshad, from your perspective, how's the customer reacting? Because, he may or may not be in the digital channel as such, right? And Sujoy, from your, experience perspective, most of the customers, I'm assuming, will be, through the online world. What is the customer behavior difference you are witnessing in terms of digitization journey, in terms of contactless journey, and the journey ahead?
Yeah. So probably I'll just answer your first question. So what we have seen is customer is always carrying a mobile, and we are treating mobile as one of the most important, asset which can be used for contactless payment. So every other company is also doing that same. But authentication is where actually we are focusing on. So not just having a mobile is one way of authentication, but we are also using OTPs and multiple factor authentications to ensure that customer, is he's aware that the transaction which he's doing is well secured. At the same time, we are ensuring that no data is stored on the device, or no data is getting compromised during this transaction. That's something which we are already doing. Second, if you look at the last couple of transactions or frauds, see, multiple channels, like we used to use WhatsApp messages. You send a link, click on link, and pay some 3,000 rupees or 2,000 rupees, and you get some bonus points. These kind of frauds which we have seen in past. So user awareness is something which we are also focusing on. Like, now if you look at the number of frauds, definitely it is going to go up. But at the same time, if you look at the basic awareness, if that awareness happens through your channel, your mobile apps, your company mobile apps, when you visit a stores, if your store people gives you awareness that this is how you should do transaction. If you don't get links from our source, the authenticated source, don't open it. That's the basic things which we have inculcated as a practices, and which has actually we have seen over the last couple of years, or rather I would say in month, the things are moving towards that. So customers are getting aware that we should click link which are coming from authenticated sources. So some small things, but yes, I have seen that change happening in the in the market.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think everything that Harshit said. I think consumers today are spoiled for choice. I think the options of payments that they're available are literally meets anybody's latent demands as well. What we saw, of course, was a massive shift in customers going to digital platforms. So obviously, it started with the pandemic. We have seen physical stores all open, but the move which happened to digital, that trajectory is still continuing as well. Where the consumers were going and shopping online, ordering food in food and even groceries. That's something which really accelerated, and we continue to see that trends. We're also seeing a lot of adoption in among the youth, um, even younger. The typical user of payments is also, the average age also is dropping as well. And what we see in future is payments will start appearing in places which you don't expect, and to a large extent at Mastercard we also look to see how do you make payments more as a part of the of the shopping experience or the purchasing experience, rather than a separate experience, right? It should be intuitive as much as possible. If I want to go and buy something, let me go buy it. I'm interested in buying it. I'm you know Paying for it is something. Yes, if I have the funds, it should happen. I should be allowed to buy it without really having to go through much. And I think that's something which we have to work towards. There's technology, there is data, there is adoption, there's regulation. All of these things have to come together for that to happen. The idea is to make sure that a person who has got an ability to buy something should be able to buy it with the minimum amount of intervention, with the maximum amount of with the maximum amount of convenience, and close to zero risk. I wouldn't say zero, but close to zero risk on it.
So probably facial expressions, right? Payments through facial expressions is, one way ahead. And few companies we here globally have launched, these
Yeah.
contactless payments as well.
Yeah.
So I think we have lot in store ahead. Would like to conclude the journey here. So, takeaways from the sessions are, awareness needs to be created so that penetration can increase, right? Comfort needs to be given to the last mile consumer or the merchant that, they can actually make contactless payments, so that, digitization journey and, overall thought from a regulatory perspective can, pave its way. That's what probably the, way forward for the industry is. We will, just keep the floor open for questions, if any. Are there any, Anand, for any of the panelists? I guess not. So thank you everyone for your time. I think it was a very, very interesting conversation today. And I'm sure the industry overall will benefit, with the takeaways from here. Anything
Hi,
you would want to add, Anand?
No, thank you so much for the closing remarks. I think we're almost on time, so I'll just like to really thank the panel and especially for Shweta for moderating the beautiful session. And it was a very wonderful session with amazing insights and also very gripping. Also, I'd like to thank the panel for taking your time out and gracing us with your presence. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone. Thank you,
Thank
Shweta.
you.
Thank you, Anand.
Thank you.
Bye.
And right.
Bye.
And